We are once again live from Disability Solutions for Independent Living. I am going to introduce to you all once again the occupational therapy assistant students from Daytona State. We have Mariah, Chelsea, and Sage joining us today. Today's topic is going to address sensory processing disorder and some of the different stages that you will see in a child with sensory processing disorders. I won't talk too long. I will allow the ladies to do their thing. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Mariah, and I'm going to be first talking about over-responsiveness in a child. So over-responsiveness is an exaggerated response of the nervous system to sensory input. For example, people who easily get motion sick are over-responding to vestibular input, which is the sensation of movement. The nervous system goes into a fight or flight mode even when no real danger exists. Over-responders need calming forms of sensory input, such as slow, rhythmic movements, deep pressure to the muscles and joints, heavy work activities, peaceful music, dim or natural lighting, and quiet activities are all helpful. Symptoms include picky eating habits. You'll see signs of that. Clothing issues. They often don't like tags, seams, or certain fabrics. They may have self-care issues such as disliking their hair care, maybe nail trimming, face washing, or bathing. They may have a low frustration tolerance, moody, irritable, or fussy. They have frequent meltdowns that are out of proportion to the situation at times. And they can be easily overwhelmed in noisy, busy environments like birthday parties, school lunchrooms, restaurants, or Walmart. They may dislike light touch and may be resistant to messy play. As for the sensory input, the child likes to avoid novel sensory input. It's fearful or cautious. They easily become overstimulated. They may run away or seek a retreat from sensory input, such as covering their ears with loud noises or avoiding a variety of food textures. Our nervous system needs to be at just right state of alertness and attention to learn and engage appropriately within the environment. Some ways to get the just right include such as calming activities. So for a child who's oversensitive to sensations in the mouth, or also called oral defensiveness, they may not like solid food or avoid strongly flavored food. Food which is lumpy can also cause them to gag. And some kids are also oversensitive to smells of food, and they rather seek out bland food as a result, such as maybe bread, crackers, or pasta. So overall, children with under-responsive sensory input, the child seeks excessive input. They like to constantly move or fidget, placing their hands on everything, typically appearing more pulled together after an intense sensory exercise. For both over-responsive and under-responsive alerting activities, for some ideas include, such as chewy foods, heavy work, deep pressure input, pushing, pulling, hanging, carrying heavy objects, or playing tug of war. Also going back to the under-responsive input, the child could also incorporate eating crunchy snacks, bouncing on a therapy ball, jumping on a trampoline, rolling, or spinning. So moving on to Chelsea, she's gonna go ahead and speak about sensory seeking activities.
So once again, we're talking about the 6 types of sensory processing disorder. Mariah talked about the under-responsive child and the over-responsive child. So I'm going to be talking about the sensory seeking child and the disorganized child. So for sensory seeking, This child is also called the wild child. They are at max intensity all the time. They're not aware of safety. They're also called the daredevil, and they like to be in control. Some behaviors of a sensory-seeking child could be hyperactivity, the inability to sit still. You could crave intense movements like amusement parks or swinging upside down or even spinning in an office chair. You could have aggressive behaviors such as hitting, kicking, biting, or pushing tables and chairs. You could be constantly touching everything and wanting to rub things on your cheek. You could have a high pain tolerance, or you could be unintentionally being rough with others. You don't even know your own strength. So an example of this could be that your child, you see them in school or at home, they're constantly bumping into things, or maybe they're just giving unsolicited hugs out. An alternative for this would be to use a weighted blanket, or even, we talked about this last week, weighted objects, things to put on your lap. This is a wrist weight. You could put it on your wrist. It's really only about 2 pounds. Or you could put it on your lap. So that gives that sensory input, keeping you down and keeping you grounded. Sensory-seeking activities can be really useful for this type of wild child. You want to plan activities that give intense doses of sensory input. You want to meet the needs of the child, and this will help them stay calm and focused. Some parents like to know how often or how long you should do these activities for. For this type of sensory-seeking child, you want to do about 5 to 10 minutes of these kinds of sensory activities I'm going to give you, maybe even 1 to 2 hours a day. So some activities would be, I've got some things here for you, would be blowing bubbles. Surprisingly, blowing bubbles or even like drinking through a straw really gives children that are sensory-seeking that input that they want. So just because bubbles are fun, I'll demonstrate it real quick. I need some work on that.
I love it.
So just something like that, I'm already loving it. I'm getting that sensory input that I want. Another thing, objects orally that you could do for sensory input would be things like really strong flavors. So like a sour food, like sour warheads, or maybe even spicy foods or really bold flavors. Like my personal favorite is salt and vinegar chips, or Cool Ranch Doritos are a good one. Other things you can do orally to give a child sensory input would be things like blowing through a straw or drinking out of a straw. That gives a little bit of extra sensory input for that kind of child. Other things are children that are sensory seeking really love rotary input. So rotary meaning spinning in a chair or swinging in a swing. They also like intense proprioceptive input. So doing things like heavy work, like tug of war or a TheraBand. If my cameraman will move that way towards that chair, there is a TheraBand wrapped around the bottom of that chair. That could be for a child who is in a classroom or at home. I'll come over there and show it. So a lot of times teachers are not allowing kids to have fidgets because it's distracting other children. So one thing that you could do that other students aren't really going to see is having a TheraBand on the floor. So I'm going to put my feet on it and I'm just going to bounce. And that's giving me some sensory input that is not really distracting the rest of my class. This could be done at a virtual setting, since that is due to the pandemic. We are doing that pretty often, or even at school. OTs recommend this a lot in the school setting, but you could also bring it home. These are very cheap, and if you did have a hard time finding them, I'm sure that Disability Solutions could help you access that. So we're going to be moving back over here to give some more examples. So going on with sensory seeking, other things that you can do is musical instruments like whistles, party blowers, and then we're going to move on to sports. So what's some kind of activities that you could do for this sensory seeking child? You could do a ball pit. Those are really fun. That's great for sensory input. Even pillow fights really, really are great for this type of child. And that's something easy and fun that every parent has at home that they could do. Other things are movement games such as hopscotch or jump rope or even freeze tag. Just causing those movements and breaks are going to help that child with that input. So I'm going to be moving on to dyspraxia. We call this child the disorganized child. Dyspraxia is also known as a DCD. It's a developmental coordination disorder. It's a neurological condition that causes movement and coordination issues. Some examples of this you might be noticing this at an early age, but it could also be occurring at a child with an older age. It is actually very common in our society. 6 to 10% of the population is affected by this disorder. Dyspraxia, you may experience problems in school, such as difficulty handwriting or even doing fine motor tasks. I'm going to give some examples of fine motor tasks later on if you have any questions about it. So for this activity, this is a water bottle. Most parents have these at home or in school, and I'm just going to be focusing on fine motor coordination. That means small tasks using just the objects of my hands, like grasping. So these are little pom-poms that I got from the dollar store. This is a fun activity I used to do as a preschool teacher to teach them fine motor skills. So I'm just going to keep popping these in here. For a 3-year-old child, this is actually a rather difficult task. So they're working on a pincer grasp, which is something that helps us do with handwriting. And we're going to be inserting these into here. So I'll only do a couple, but once again, a great activity to work on fine motor skills. Some oral tips for this type of child. You want to give them things that are difficult to chew. If they're having motor planning issues, disorganized child, also dyspraxia, is you could use wide stem pens and pencils, like those big crayons that we used back in the day. They're hard to find now, or even the ones that are triangle shaped are really good. We also recommend using rubber or texture grips, the ones that slip on the end of the pencil. I could not find any, but I know they're around at the dollar store. Even giving technology a try. If your child has dyspraxia and they're having problems writing and doing handwriting, use technology. Go to typing. At 7 years old, a child is able to type without looking. So that doesn't really involve a lot of fine motor skills. It would be, if they're really struggling with handwriting, I recommend in this virtual society moving to something where you can type would be great. A couple other options, using graph paper. If they're disorganized and they're not really writing on a straight line, graph paper is great for keeping them on that solid line. Or even using colorful line paper for students that need to write large letters. Another thing, 2 extra tips, would be providing breaks. We've talked about this in every webinar. Breaks are so useful. You want to give that child a second to pause, relax, and then they'll come back even more focused than they were before. And then last but not least, allow a child with dyspraxia extra time. Their processing is not going to be the same as a normal child, so they're going to need extra time to do the assignments, extra time to process and understand the assignments. You can't expect them to grasp the concept as quickly as someone else might. So our last 2 topics of sensory processing disorder is going to be talked about by Sage. He's going to talk about sensory discrimination, and he's going to talk about postural disorder.
Hello, so my name is Sage. The first thing I'm going to be discussing today is going to be sensory discrimination. The child also might be known as the klutz. So two topics under sensory discrimination that I'm going to be addressing today is going to be proprioception and tactile input. So proprioception is basically being able to distinguish where your body is in space. So an example of that would be if you think about touching the back of your head, you would just know where to put your hand because you just have a sense of where the back of your head is. Tactile input is just the sense of touch. So a couple of examples of something that you can do with your child at home is something called a 2-point test. Something that you can use for this is sometimes people have toothpicks at home. So you can use something like a toothpick or something like I just have a simple marker here, or even you can use a pen. So what we're going to be doing here is basically working with the child to try and distinguish if you're using a toothpick, which is sharp, and then a pen or a pencil or a marker, which is going to have like a flat, smooth edge. So when the child has their eyes closed, what you're going to do is just have their hand out, and you're going to, without telling them what you're doing, you're going to just simply poke one of their fingers with either the sharp pointy end or the flat dull end, and you're going to have them describe to you whether they felt sharp or a dull feeling. Another activity that could be really fun with your child is something called stereognosis. And basically what this is you can get a large bowl, and then you could put a variety of items in here. So you could put in a pencil, spare change that you have around the house, paper clips, a hair comb, and this could be a fun activity. So what you do is you have your child with their eyes closed reach into this bowl and just grab just one item out and just have them feel it and play with it in their hand, and then have them because of the low tone nature and because of low endurance, one thing that we can do with our children to help facilitate that is having elbows on the table. And I know this goes against basic table manners, but maybe when you're at home, you're a little bit more comfortable with having elbows on the table. So when a child's eating at the table, if they're able to sit in their own chair by themselves, you can just have them place their elbows on the table like this while maintaining this posture. Having their arms on the table like this just helps provide more support and balance. So that, because I know, like, when you sit in a chair and you're like perfectly straight, even for someone who might not have low tone, after a while you kind of start to get that feeling in your back and you just want to just relax. So having your elbows on a table like this kind of helps to facilitate that if you're just kind of leaning forward just slightly. Also, having your elbows on the table is actually going to have some tactile and proprioceptive input as well, because your child is going to be able to feel the table and their elbows as they eat. So an activity that I have here that we're going to use it could be a really fun activity with your child to target low tone. So if you just follow me with the camera up here, just a little more.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. Okay, so what I have here is just a simple piece of printer paper that I just taped to a wall. If you happen to have like a whiteboard or a dry erase board at home on an easel or something like that, that is also something that you can do at home. If not, it's as simple as 2 pieces of tape and a piece of paper. And what you want to do is you want to tape the piece of paper onto a surface that's a little bit higher or taller than the child's midline. So with this, what we're looking to see is we want to see the head is going to be slightly looking up, not all the way up, because that might cause balance issues. But we do want them to have we want their posture to have good posture. So standing up straight, feet shoulder width apart, and we can just have them. You can just tell them to draw. Have them draw shapes, letters, their favorite, a dog, a cat, anything that they might like to draw. So what this can do is.
Let's see your best dog drawing.
So I'm going to attempt to draw a dog here. So as you draw, this can help with muscle strength as that child with whatever their dominant hand that they use to write in. So I'm right-handed, so I'm going to attempt to draw a dog here. So I'm not an artist by any means. So, just to kind of give you an example.
I love it.
It's totally a horse.
Okay, so this, believe it or not, this is supposed to be a dog. I'm not sure if you can see that, but what you want to make sure ensure that your child is doing is you're wanting to observe their posture. So you don't want them like hunched over like this. I know that children with low muscle tone by nature, just because it's more comfortable, they might have some type of hunched over posture like this. But so if you see that, you want to address it and just have your child see if they can stand up more straight, and they can even have whatever writing hand they have, just have them rest it. By nature, just because it's more comfortable, they might have some type of hunched over posture like this. But so if you see that, you want to address it and just have your child see if they can stand up more straight, and they can even have whatever writing hand they have, just have them rest it on the wall. Or their non-dominant hand, you can have them rested on the wall as an extra base of support. Rest your arm on the wall like so, and you can just have them write their name or any type of shape that they like so. So doing this, we're hoping to increase their muscle tone, their strength, their endurance, and this can also be a really fun activity for like an arts and crafts time. So again, just to reiterate, when talking about posture with a child with low tone, you want to make sure that their back is fully erect, keeping your head up. So you want to try to have activities that involve them just at least keeping their head up or just slightly tilted up just a little bit. One more thing that we can talk about, just another technique for a child with low tone, is getting them active with chores around the house. So something like this, you can have them clean vertical surfaces. So something like you can have them maybe clean a mirror or a wall or a door, or something with a little bit more vertical shapes to have them correct their posture if it might be if they have like a dirt mark or something like that, or just any type of surface that you can have them clean. And that concludes postural disorder.